What's going on, guys? Derek here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, super pumped to bring this one to you. It's the tight end rankings. We have already done the quarterback rankings, and next is wide receiver and running back, so keep an eye out for that. Obviously, we're not going to have enough time to go super in-depth on each player, but we'll spend a lot of time on the players who are starters and then touch on the potential sleepers. And by the end of it, you'll get an understanding of which players we like overall and which ones we're probably avoiding. But before we do get into that, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which running back with at least 50 rushing attempts had the lowest elusiveness rating. The answer was James White, and nobody got this answer correct yet, but there's still time, so we'll keep an eye out. We're not going to hold out hopes for him to be a 3-down back in the future or anything like that, but it just goes to show you how if you're a specialist, you can still succeed. But James White certainly was not elusive last season. Now, today's stat of the day, we're moving over to tight ends, and through the final 8 games of last season, which tight end with at least 20 targets had the highest yards per reception, and through that same span had the highest percentage of his targets be deep targets. Okay, so which tight end through the final 8 games had the highest yards per reception and the highest percentage of deep targets? They must have had at least 20 targets through those final 8 games. Though, leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. But we're going to jump right into the rankings because this is going to be a little bit of a longer one. I'll try to gloss over the players, but keep in mind, rankings change. We're in late July here. Training camp just started, and there are already players going down that have extreme fantasy impact, so we cannot predict what happens and we cannot go back and edit these videos. So if you want to stay updated on the rankings, consider becoming a member of our website and purchasing our draft package at thefantasyfootballadvice.com. There are loads of other perks available, and it is the lowest price in the entire industry, and you're going to get a load of information on top of that. But yeah, let's get into it. And the first player, obviously, Travis Kelce, no shocker there. We know the news that Tyreek Hill is no longer facing a suspension, but even with that, he should still be the best tight end in fantasy football by a wide margin. His role in the offense, super secure. The tight end position itself, super volatile, and he's putting up wide receiver numbers at the tight end position. And while we were super excited to have him as a potential borderline first round draft selection, now we can't really condone that because the upside or the potential upside is just not really there as it was before, and he's dropping. He was being taken on average about the beginning of the second round. Now he's dropped all the way down to the middle of the second round, and potentially he's going to drop even more, at which case he really could become a value at some point. But our excitement for taking him is not as high. Previously, he was in his own tier. Now there is another tight end that is in his tier, and it's not Zach Ertz. It is actually George Kittle. So we're moving to George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers, who broke the record for receiving yards at the tight end position. And he was going as a super late round pick last season. Some people were even able to get him off of waivers. And basically the stars aligned for him when it came to an opportunity standpoint. There were a lot of injuries on that team, and for that reason you might think that we would be lower on him, but no, he actually performed extremely well. He led the league in yards after catch, beating out even players like Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. The dude was a complete monster, and he should remain as a very important member to this offense, an offense that's a bit underrated. But on to tier 2, we have Zach Ertz, and I'm an Eagles fan myself, so this is not biased by any means. I know a lot of people have Zach Ertz as the second tight end off the board, but regression likely incoming. He had a massive amount of targets, massive amount of receptions. He actually had more receptions than he had as a career high for targets. Heading into this season, his career high for targets was 123 targets. He had 126 receptions last year. His targets, 156. He just completely blew away his career averages, and we do have to expect it to come back to the norm. And Carson Wentz, while healthy, could assist him in being more efficient and effective. Obviously, he's a better red zone passer than Nick Foles, but Carson Wentz is not proven to stay healthy, especially recently, and there's no Nick Foles to back him up. If anything happens to Carson Wentz, the backup is going to be potentially Cody Kessler. And remember, Zach Ertz was on the roster when Nick Foles was the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles way back in the day, so they did have some chemistry together, so he could continue to keep up the production. We're not going to have that luxury this season. Dallas Goedert's there, likely going to become more involved. Deshaun Jackson's going to take more targets. Alshon Jeffrey could play more games. There's still Nelson Aguilar, and there's just a lot of weapons on this team, and I don't think that they're going to to focus on feeding him targets. They're just going to focus on moving the ball effectively. So for those reasons, we could see him regressing enough to put him in the second tier. The fourth tight end is actually O.J. Howard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is a player we are super high on this season, and it just makes sense when you break it down. The position, it doesn't need a ton of volume, and the main concern with O.J. Howard is that he hasn't had a ton of volume. But this season, they lost a lot of targets. Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries, they're no longer on the team. It's going to be O.J. Howard, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. And it's going to be an offense that's more than likely going to finish within the top 10 in passing touchdowns, pass attempts. And when you're running the projections, even at a modest 17% target market share, the projection for O.J. Howard has him at 68 receptions for 1,063 yards and 9 touchdowns. And he doesn't even have to produce that to pay off his draft day price tag. So we're super high on him, and you're likely going to get a deal on him on draft day. The fifth tight end we have is Hunter Henry, and he is finally going to return from the ACL tear that he suffered last season, which was supposed to be his breakout season. He's had more than enough time to recover, and he has never played without Antonio Gates sucking up the red zone targets. And we saw how valuable that position could be with Mike Williams last season. Well, Hunter Henry has already proven to be the guy that Phillip Rivers looked towards in the end zone. And it's a very pass-friendly offense that could potentially lose Melvin Gordon too. So there's a ton of upside. There's a lot of injury risk when it comes to Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, which could obviously boost his potential upside. So there's a lot to love, and you're not risking a whole lot. Yeah, you have to draft him earlier, but it's hard to find the combination of upside with relative safety. So he's 100% a target for us. The next guy, though, Evan Engram, coming in at tight end 6 of the New York Giants, the last tight end in this actual tier 2. He's primed for a big season. He's got Odell Beckham, who left. Sterling Shepard has a broken thumb. Golden Tate suspended. There's no receivers on this team, but Golden Tate's suspended. There's really no receivers on this team. Evan Engram is likely poised for a big season, but he comes with a lot of concerns. He's never really been all that efficient. He always needed a high volume of targets in order to produce for fantasy. He struggled with drops. But he is a very gifted athlete, and he's a big body, so we could really see it paying off. But keep in mind, he has a hamstring injury. He dealt with injuries last season, so it's a very risky pick. One we probably wouldn't take just because of the other options around him. We would opt for them instead. Our interest could change. We literally just got the news that Golden Tate was suspended today, so continue to monitor that. We're moving to the third tier, David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. Excluding Ertz, I'm pretty sure this is the biggest shocker that we have in the rankings, because I know most people typically would rank Eric Ebron and Jared Cook, at least based on the current mock draft ADPs. Those are the players typically going at the top of this tier. We'll talk about the other guys a little bit later, so let's focus on Njoku, and he's going to be on a good offense. This offense is going to be much improved, more scoring opportunities. Odell on the roster is going to mean the quality of targets is going to increase, because Odell Beckham is going to be the main focal point of the secondary, and David Njoku has already showed us that he is a special player, and we already knew he was gifted athletically. I know it's been a couple years since he's came in the league, but if you don't remember, we're talking about a guy with a 96th percentile agility score, 93rd percentile catch radius, and an 82nd percentile SparkX score. So when we're throwing darts, we want to look for factors like strength of the offense, strength of the quarterback, ability of the player, and when you add all those up, David Njoku just hits all the marks. The only concern, obviously, is if he will have a large enough target share, but the projections we have, they're still modest. We only have him at 51 receptions, and if you want to get full access to that, you can gain it on the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, link in the description. But up next is Vance McDonald, and this one is really interesting. He's always had potential. You know, he came over from the 49ers, which he showed flashes of excellence. He just couldn't stay healthy. Then on the Pittsburgh Steelers, he performed well in short bursts. Obviously, he's dealt with his fair share of injuries there as well, but he was fighting the depth chart against Jesse James, who is now gone. And with all of the open targets that Antonio Brown left, Vance is going to be looked at as an outlet in this offense. He's already got a rapport with Big Ben. He's got the size. He's got the home run ability. And I would just be shocked if he plays a full 16-game season and does not meet the tight end 8, which is currently where we have have him ranked, which I think is a fair value and excellent value. So he's a target for us. Who is not a target for us is the tight end 9, Jared Cook. And really, it comes down to just paying for last year's production. He actually had his best season as a pro. He's not young. He's 32 years old. And the Saints, while they do have a history of using the tight end with Jimmy Graham, those days are over. Since then, they haven't really found a replacement for him. And the target share going to the tight end position has been low, averaging 87 targets per season. They already have a group of tight ends there, and Cook has been inconsistent throughout his entire career. Regardless though, ranking him here is not egregious because there is that potential for him to get that red zone work, and Drew Brees is accurate enough to get him the ball, so Jared Cook won't have to do too much. It's just his range of outcomes are extremely wide this season, so it's not typically a player that we would be looking to target, and where he's going in drafts, there's just no way he would ever be on our team. David Njoku is going after him, and we have him ranked ahead of him, so that tells you all you need to know about that. But up next is a guy who you can get really late, and in some mocks I've seen him not be drafted at all, and that's Austin Hooper. Super safe in his role in this offense. He's also extremely athletic, performs very well when you dive into the numbers, catching 9 of 13 red zone targets, and we know how much Julio Jones struggles in the red zone at times, and if Devonta Freeman goes down, they're going to have to adapt, and relying on the tight end position might be a route that they take. Not everyone probably remembers, but Zach Ertz had several seasons where people were appreciating his role in the offense, his consistency, and predicting the breakout the following year, and it didn't come, and then all of a sudden, while we're not predicting that type of upside for Hooper, he's still a solid selection and a good bet to finish as a tight end 1, and in most of the drafts, he's going virtually undrafted. There's one last player in the tier 3, and that is Eric Ebron of the Colts, and I cannot get behind this pick one bit. He's injured, his snap count was ridiculously low last season, he produced an extremely high amount of touchdowns, they've added receivers in Devin Funchess, Paris Campbell, they have a tight end not named Jack Doyle, and Jack Doyle only played in 6 games, assuming he's healthy. There's just so many reasons why Eric Ebron should not be able to produce like he did last season, yet we do still know the connection with him and Luck is real, and he could have some good weeks and he's going to have some bad weeks. It's just not really the type of tight end you want to lock into your roster every week because 13 touchdowns, not realistic, and the floor is going to be really low, so it could end up hurting you more than it's going to help you when he actually goes off. We'd look to target him more in like DraftKings, daily fantasy, not so much in season long. So we're in the 4th tier, and you'll notice that this is where the tiers start to get wider. The range of outcomes are also a lot wider, but we're not afraid to drop these types of players. And it starts with the tight end 12, Kyle Rudolph. And one thing that may surprise you guys is that he was actually 6th in red zone targets last season with 15. He only was able to haul in half of them, and only 3 went for touchdowns. And that's actually pretty uncharacteristic of Kyle Rudolph. So there is definitely room for improvement there. They did draft Irv Smith. It's a rookie. You don't really need to worry too much about them. As we know, rookies typically struggle for fantasy in year 1. Kyle Rudolph will be the main guy. We would like to see an increase in targets. 80 targets is not going to do it, but this is going to be Kirk Cousins' 2nd year in this offense, so there is some upside with this pick. And you know what his floor is. It's basically what he produced last season. On to the tight end 13, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens, and this is one of my favorite picks. A rookie last season on Baltimore, which as we know is a run-first offense, which you wouldn't typically want to target a tight end or any sort of receiver on a run-first offense, but the tight end position itself does not require a lot of volume, and 552 yards and 3 touchdowns as a rookie is super respectable. So he's a guy I like to take a shot on without actually risking any sort of investment. So we have him at 13. QB 14 is Trey Burton of the Chicago Bears. Finished as the tight end 7 last season. Now he comes in being drafted as the tight end 12, and we don't have him at consensus either. We come in lower. It's just this offense has no consistency in it, and when we're talking tale of 2 seasons, I would have much rather preferred for the top of his production to come at the tail end of the season rather than the beginning of the season, because when your player falls off, it doesn't leave you hopeful for the next season. That is not the case for Trey Burton, but Trubisky, he's not a bad quarterback. We've seen flashes of excellence, so if you want to take a flyer on Burton, by all means. He's going a little bit earlier than we would like. We like guys going later than him better, so he's not going to end up on our teams, but it's a pick that has the potential to pay off. And speaking of potential to pay off, tight end 15 15 is Jordan Reed of the Washington Redskins. There's no way you can draft him as your tight end 1 because 9 times out of 10, he is not going to see the field. But believe it or not, he did have some fantasy relevance last season. He only scored 2 touchdowns in 13 weeks, but there is potential if Dwayne Haskins becomes the starter, and Jordan Reed is their most talented receiver, hands down. If he can be a mid-range tight end 2 on an offense that was 27th in pass attempts, 29th in scoring, and 30th in touchdowns, imagine what he could potentially produce even if Haskins brings him up to somewhere around middle of the pack. Tight end 16 is Dallas Goedert, and I know it seems crazy to think of drafting 2 tight ends in Philadelphia and one's got a guaranteed workload. But realistically, the Eagles run a ton of 2 tight end sets. You never really see this much in fantasy, but it is a possibility that this pick could still pay off. During his rookie season, he had 334 yards and 4 touchdowns. I know it doesn't seem all that impressive, but for rookie numbers, those are not bad. But what was most impactful was seeing him when he was used. He performed, he competed, and he wasn't a disappointment to the team. So all signs indicate for him to continue to get more usage in 2019, which means there is a potential for fantasy value. God forbid anything happens to Ertz, and he could potentially have, dare I say it, top 5 upside. Tight end 17 is Delaney Walker out of Tennessee, and it's not an exciting pick. It's not one that has a ton of upside, and the safety is starting to come into question. They're adding more weapons at the receiver position. Adam Humphries, A.J. Brown. They seem to want to commit to the run with Derrick Henry. Marcus Mariota, he's been inconsistent too. There's now Ryan Tannehill, so hopefully there's no quarterback controversy on top of that, but there are just a lot of factors that make this pick seem unappealing, but it's not a complete avoid. If you're drafting him, you're not afraid of dropping him, and out of any receiver on the Tennessee Titans, he does have the best rapport with Marcus Mariota. So again, not a terrible pick, not a great pick, but if you got to settle and you missed out on the early guys, we could see why you would take him. The next pick, which nobody's really talking about, is Jimmy Graham of the Green Bay Packers, and I think it's because he burnt so many people last season. He wasn't good. He still managed to finish as the tight end 14, but it's his first year on a new offense. He's dealt with several injuries. He'll be more familiar with the offense as he heads into this season. The offense should be more functional overall, and we're trying to predict who's it going to be. Is it MVS? Is it Geronimo Allison? Well, Jimmy Graham should get an uptick in targets as well, so it's not a bad pick if you're in the later rounds. He's not a guy that everybody's been targeting, but it's a pick that certainly has upside. In that late in the drafts, we really don't care too much about the risk anyway, but that's going to finish it for tier 4. We've got about 9 more in tier 5. And in tier 5, you don't really have to worry too much about drafting these players. Most of them are going to go undrafted, if not all of them. But remember the names, remember the offenses, because these guys do on paper have the upside. And it starts with Ricky Seals-Jones out of Arizona. Unless you were living under a rock, everybody was hyped on Ricky Seals-Jones, and he's a converted wide receiver. And if he can catch the ball, odds are there's going to be enough plays to go around to increase his production from last season. But it still remains to be seen what his involvement will be in this offense. Number 20 is TJ Hockenson, and he's for the Detroit Lions, a rookie, and we have a lot of faith in him for the future. This season, he may not have all that much volume, but it's possible that throughout the season, he can develop into a starter. For now, he's just going to learn the ropes. This offense is probably going to take a step back, and they're going to need all the weapons that they can get. TJ Hockenson might be one of their best weapons. Tight end 21 is Chris Herndon, and man, the suspension kills it, but at the same time, that can be seen as a good thing because now we're getting him at a discount. He is easily attainable. Will it pay off? No guarantees on that. He does have total sleeper potential. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly what he produces next season. Tight end 22 is Jack Doyle. Doyle was injured a lot last season, and it's not a very high upside pick. The same stuff and concerns that we were saying about Eric Ebron, they hold true to Jack Doyle as well. So nothing personal, Jack Doyle. I just don't think you're going to get the same target share that you were. And at your age, you're unlikely to turn a new leave, so let's just be honest. And speaking of age, 23 is Greg Olsen. He's having some foot issues that are really holding him back, and he's getting up there in age. He's 34 years old. It does make you wonder if it's worth a pick or not, so I'd give him a chance to come back before I would recommend drafting him. Tight end 24, Mike Gesicki. And we have a new offense in Miami, a new coaching staff. So his involvement and usage this season could go up. And we all know he's a very talented player on his own. And he's an athletic beast. So if he can get on the field, he's likely going to produce 95th percentile height adjusted speed score, 99th percentile burst, 99th percentile agility score, 97th percentile spark X score. Sign me up. It's a bad offense. They should be behind late in games, which if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, athletic, he's got a cannon. He does typically target the wide receivers, but when you can't trust your wide receivers, who are you going to go to? Probably the athletic monster. Like I said, he's not being drafted, so just keep an eye on your waiver wire, and if he has a big game, you might want to buy in. And last but not least, number 25, Jordan Thomas of the Houston Texans, and this is just a simple factor that comes down to him just being in a great position, the only receiving tight end on the Texans. There's Darren Fells, but he's more of a blocking tight end, and other than that, they just have a third round rookie, so he is going to play the role as the main receiving tight end, and we have a history of Deshaun Watson relying on the tight end, so it is a fruitful position. There's only 32 teams. He's not going to have to do very much to finish as the 25th tight end. All he's going to have to do is have a safe and consistent role and score a few points a week. But guys, that is going to do it for the tight end rankings. Please tune in for the wide receiver and running back rankings. And while you're here, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.